everyone, welcome to React series. This is part 6 and today's we will learn nesting component and composition model. I will describe what is composition, extracting component, children, JSX and prop dealing and how to solve it with composition. There are no limitations on how you can build UI functionality using the component and composition pattern. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe, press the bell icon to get all the notifications. Let's get started. As I mentioned in my previous videos, component allowed us to split our code across multiple files. When we need to use one section many times, simply repeat that component rather than writing same lines of code multiple times. We create nesting component to build more complex user interface. To fully understand in React, we will go practically. Let's create another component file inside the component folder named list.js, and inside this component file, let's declare the arrow function constant list and return the JS. And in the end, we will export this list component file. Remember to save it every time whenever you make change. Then go to my component. From my component, remove the following data and add it to the list component. So here we will paste it. Now we need to import this list component at the top of the my component file. We'll add just list as here and as here. And inside the JSX, we will add list tag and close this list tag. Now pass the prop detail inside the curly braces, pass constant course. It will render relative to the parent. Now we need to go to the list.js. We need to replace this course variable with detail. If you are using VS Code, simply press Ctrl and D and it will select all the variable. We are going to replace it detail with going to replace at once. Next, we need to pass these props in the parentheses using the curly braces. And for outputting data, we also need import list component at the top of list.js. Here, import. So now if you go to browser, you will see data is outputting correctly and everything is fine. Put that simply, a parent component that renders additional component is referred to as nested component. We extract the component. So what is composition? When we talk about reusability, we think about components. So what role does composition play? It is shareability. Two components can share the part that make them up. By using composition model, we can get rid of duplicate code. Let's modify some code before moving on to make it appear as though we are building something along the way. Let's create the list.css file in the component folder. And I do prepare some code beforehand, so I'm going to paste it in the list.css file. We need this file to import inside the list.js at the very top. Import list.css. Remember to add extension. Now add some styling to our my component. Let's add some CSS. Okay, it's giving me error because I accidentally add the S. And here we are. We tweak some styling so it looks like we are building something. I'm also going to move this button up here inside the my component. Let's cut this button from here, paste it here. And here we are. Let's examine the component similarity between the codes. If we look at the outcome, both of our containers, this one and this one, have the same fancy border, which indicate that we use same styles multiple times. The common styles between them can be extracted and placed in a separate component. Let's create another file in the component folder. Name it fancyborder.js. We will handle it in the same manner as a regular component. Let's declare arrow function with a constant fancy border and return element with class name fancy border and export this file. After saving it, let's create another file, the component folder fancyborder.cs. We will now remove duplicate styling from styles component, border and border radius, and add it to fancyborder.css with the class selector fancyborder. And now import this file at the top of fancyborder.js component. Now we will reuse fancy border component throughout our application. In my component, we can simply remove div and replace with our newly created component. So it is fancy border. Don't forget to import fancy border component file at the top of my component. Now it will automatically apply predetermined styles. This is a component, but what make a composition different from a regular component? You can't use custom component as a wrapper around another types of content. In the same manner, for using this kind of wrapper, which contains both an opening and closing tag, we will use a special props.children. Any data passed within these tags is passed into the fancy border component as a children prop. Because we applied the class name prop to the custom component, it will not immediately support CSS classes. So if you look at the browser, styles are missing. We will add some code inside the fancy border in order to set a class name. So in the fancy border, let's define the content with the class's constant name. Here in single quotes, we will add fancy border class name, give it a space, and we will add props dot class name. And for using the props keyword, we also need to pass the props as an argument. And here in the class name prop, we need to pass, and within these tags we also need to pass props.children. So as a result, any class name we receive from the outside, like container, now added to the string, and here we pass the expression we created earlier at the class name, and prop.children is a special prop need to pass for using this kind of wrappers. Now if you look at the browser, we get the same result as before. Next, we can also use it on list. Instead of using the div, we will add fancy border, and inside the list.css, we can remove this border and border radius, and at the browser, the result is same. So using the composition pattern, we remove duplicate code from CSS. We can also use it for more complex structure. Composition pattern is not only solve the problem of duplicate code, but also it solves the problem of props drilling. Now we will see how. In my component, we have list of data, name, language, and level. If I move this whole data from my component and add it to app.js file and make this variable globally accessible across the component, because data is transferred in a single direction, we need to pass data through several nested child components for rendering. Like in my component, even my component doesn't need it, but forced to take in. So here we need to pass props.detail, and after saving it, you will see it render data. We called it prop drilling. As you can see, the array object that hold the information is only available at the root component and has to be drilled down through several nested components in order to render the list of information. You can handle it if it passes through 3 or 4 levels deep down, but it becomes hell if it goes deeper. The simplest ways of solve this problem is to use component composition. Instead of passing detailed attributes through components, we will compose the component at the root file. Component can be passed as children or prop just like any other type of data. Thanks to component composition, we are going to nest the JSX inside the app component. So here we will remove the detail props and also remove the close tag. We will add close my component tag to pass the children there instead of nesting the list component inside my component so that it won't know the children in advance. So here we will nest a list with detailed props and also import list file. So we pass the props directly. We also need to include a special children prop to pass children component directly. Here in the curly braces, we will include props.children. Save it. In the browser, it is showing error because in app.js, we need to also include component folder. And here we also made the mistake. We passed the children. We need to pass the course. Now if we look at the browser, we successfully solved the prop drilling problem. So today's we learned how to extract component and how to use component composition to prevent code duplication and solve the prop drilling problems as well. Thanks for watching. If you're little confused by all the codes written here, go ahead and look at the React tutorial playlist. If you learned something, please like this video and comment.